once again, the toy department of the sports world, and certainly the National Football League world. That's what my college professor at the Medill School of Journalism, when I told him I wanted to do sports, the great Lou Prado, who's a diehard Penn State guy, he'd be psyched that I have Saquon Barkley on today. He said to me, "You want to work in the toy department, huh, Rich?" And that's
what did he mean by that?
Because sports is the toy department. The news is like not about toys; it's about real life, and sometimes real life crashes into the toy department.
Sometimes,
and it happened again last night. Amongst the conversation about how poor the Dolphins looked on offense and how great the Buffalo Bills were performing and how the Bills once again were coming into Miami and looking like they were going to come away with their 14th win in their last 16 visits, and they did. And we'll talk about the Bills because nobody expected them to start the season 2-0 based on all of their offseason changes. But in the midst of all that, Tua Tagovailoa already having thrown 3 interceptions in the game, including a pick 6 that he threw in the third quarter. The other 2, I don't think were really on him if you just want to quickly stray into the football world. But on a 4th and 4, with about 4.5 minutes to go in that third quarter, the offensive line, the middle of the offensive line, opens up a hole for Tua, who was struggling to get the ball to Tyreek Hill and his receivers on the night, and Tua decides to run for it. And last year, Tua Tagovailoa, in his season that everyone was wondering if he could stay healthy in because of his previous concussion issues and how he was taking jiu-jitsu and he was being more mindful of sliding and not taking hits in the pocket and knowing how to fall. I think just the way that the evening was going for him and him wanting to make a play, kind of forgot about all that and instinctively dove headfirst for the first down. And you want to talk about irony. Collides with Damar Hamlin, of all people. And it was clear and obvious to everyone that Tua Tagovailoa suffered a concussion. The fencing response, and we're all becoming concussion experts, certainly, unfortunately, when it involves Tua. Again, you could just ask anyone who's an expert at this. The fencing response, when somebody is concussed, their arms come straight up in the air. Or in the case of Tua, your fingers can splay out. And the problem is, in the years in which a lot of folks were not completely attuned to the symptoms of a player who's just been concussed, when the arms come up, a lot of the teammates would think that their concussed teammate was asking to be picked up off the ground, and they would just yank a player up when they should just leave him be. But it's clear. I mean, we all saw it. We all got sick on the spot. We all did, watching Thursday Night Football. We knew it. You saw it. His head collided with Hamlin's torso and lower half, and it's just an unfortunate circumstance. Not dirty. It's just a guy going head first, trying to make a play for his team, down 21. And I think he just lost his sense of self-protection in that moment. And now we're wondering what's next. Because in his history, in week 3 of 2022, week 3, against the Bills, by the way, in one of the 2 times the Dolphins have actually beaten the Bills in their last now 16 visits to Miami. You remember Tua in the second quarter clearly was staggered by a hit, left the game. It was called a back injury. He came back in the second half, and everyone's wondering, wait a minute, how did he come back in the game? And there was a whole conversation about what the Dolphins did and whether the independent neurologist that's at the game that's supposed to protect a player from this returned to play when he shouldn't clearly return to play. And that was a whole national conversation. And sure enough, Tua started 4 days later on Thursday Night Football in Cincinnati, and the whole country saw what happened in the second quarter. That Tua was not fortunate enough to, as he did on that week 3 or last night, walk off the field. He was taken off the field on wheels and went to the hospital. And we were all freaked out. And sure enough, he didn't return until week 7. And we were all wondering, should he even do that? There were people who were even wondering, what's he doing playing? And sure enough, week 16, Dolphins looked like they're going to the playoffs, which they did make because Tua played so well. And he got concussed against the Packers and did not play the rest of the season. Skylar Thompson, who took over last night, was the one who played in the playoffs for the one-and-done Dolphins. And then last night. And the photograph we have chosen to use on the screen is the one that I think is enduring, which is Mike McDaniel kissing Tua Tagovailoa on his head. I mean, and we all know what their relationship is. We talked about it last year when I chatted with both of them before their game in Germany against Kansas City. Their relationship, we all heard in Tua's comments about his previous coach and the current coach and how McDaniel has thrown an arm around him. And now he gave him a kiss coming off the field, and all of us are wondering, is that a kiss goodbye? Should it be a kiss goodbye? Mike McDaniel today, meeting with the media, was asked what he told Tua as Tua was coming off the field.
I told him he's the starting quarterback of his family, and that to go in the locker room, take a deep breath, and I'll see you soon.
Tua's got a young kid. As a matter of fact, when I chatted with him in Germany, he had a little toy with him, a little doll toy in the palm of his hand, because he likes to take it on the road when he's not around his kid. So. Also today, McDaniel was asked the question we're all asking, should he retire? And this was his response. Give it a listen. It's a long one.
I think it would be so wrong of me to even sniff that subject, and it's more in line of actually caring about the human being, and that's something that entirely, you're talking about his career, right? His career is his, and that's something that I think I just really, really, really wish. I totally understand it, and it's not misplaced. I totally get how that's where people want to go to. I just wish that people would for a second hear what I'm saying, that bringing up his future is not in the best interest of him. So, I'm going to plead with everybody that, does genuinely care, that should be the last thing on your mind, because you don't, what do you think that's, if I would answer that question, I'd be like, all right, this is my thoughts on his career. And he read it. If he agreed with it or he disagreed with it, either way, I've just made him worse. So I'm not taking this opportunity to just not, I don't think it's appropriate, simply because of my care and regard. And I don't think those types of conversations, when you're talking about somebody's career, I think it probably is only fair that their career should be decided by them.
No doubt. Tua has 2 children. He's got a son, Ace, and a daughter, Maisie. He's 26. He, get this right. He'll turn 27 next March. Just signed, as we all know, a monster deal. Major contract. Paying him $55 million a year on average. And, you know, with all due respect to Mike McDaniel, I understand where he's not answering that question as his coach and how he's pleading everybody to not have this conversation right now. But for the rest of us who are fans and fans of Tua, or just fans of somebody who's someone to root for, like Tua, it's tough not to sit here and think the guy should never play football again. Now, again, we're not the guy. He's also signed, again, a monster contract I'm sure he would like to earn. This is the generationally enriching money. And all of a sudden, he makes one moment where he plays instinctively instead of carefully. And it's understandable. And now all of a sudden that's in question again. Does he want to go through the rest of his life? What else is he going to do? Does he want to go through the rest of his life as, okay, Tua, you're fill in the blank, but you're the guy who retired due to concussions. You're the concussion guy, right? And again, I understand. You'd rather be the concussion guy than somebody who can't stand guy, right?
Well, obviously.
Like, that goes without saying.
No doubt.
It is so difficult to wrap your arms around even the concept of this conversation. You know, Susie was so taken aback by how quickly everybody took a knee last night. The Bills, too, because everybody knew. By the way, if there's any team that's attuned to how quickly you can go from game mode to, oh, my God, this is life mode, clearly it's the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah. But it was instantaneous last night.
Right. You could see everybody.
Guys were just immediately like waving the training
Right. They
staff
took a
on.
knee and they took off their helmets, and everybody knew what was happening in the moment. And if you're sitting here saying, well, Tua should just remind himself to be more careful, I mean, how do you play quarterback that way? Which is another reason why, if that's the way you've got to play quarterback, maybe you shouldn't play quarterback anymore. And again, I know Mike McDaniel asked for this conversation not to be had, but this is the national conversation today. 100%.
What was happening last night, in the immediate aftermath, people were speculating. Players, Shannon Sharp and others, were like, Tony Gonzalez said it on the post game. It's time to think about retiring.
My phone blew up with people texting me saying he should retire. What do you think, Rich?
Yeah.
And again, you were one of them, you know. And I'm like, first of all, I'm not him. Secondly, you know, he's got I'm sure he loves to play. Like, this is who he is. And I don't have the answer, but the general sense is, how could he come back and play? I mean, this is another moment like this. Now, he could be waking up this morning and just, I feel great. And he can pass a concussion protocol in a couple of days, and he'll be out there for the Dolphins and in their next game after the mini bye at Seattle. But if you're not supposed to fly with, you know, these symptoms or whatever, I mean, that's the longest flight you can have domestically in the National Football League is Miami to Seattle. I mean, and again, it just seems weird to have these conversations, but the number of people that have said to me and just texted me, you know, one of them is, and I'll say this here too, is our friend Eric Stonestreet. You know what he texted me? He texted me, Tua should retire and become the quarterback of the flag football team and win the Olympics.
That's incredible.
And I thought to myself, okay, you know, with all due respect to the quarterback of the flag football team, who's definitely been talking about his game recently, but Tua should retire and be the quarterback of the United States' first ever Olympic flag football team, come here to Los Angeles, win the gold medal. for the United States and start preparing for it right now. Now, that is not what Tua Tagovailoa thought his future would be when he put his Tua on the contract that he just signed. And you know what? How he hasn't come out and said it, but everything that he's been saying in the manner in which he's been saying, he's very proud of that contract and proud of earning it and the respect that he has gained through being paid like that. And I don't know how he's going to be waking up and feeling. And as Mike McDaniel said, we can all have our opinions, but there's only one guy who can make this decision, and we have to respect it. Because he's earned that respect from us. And it's Tua Tagovailoa. Who, man, I mean, can the football gods just protect this guy or what, right? I mean,
it's too bad.
Ever since he looked off that safety and tossed that touchdown coming in the middle of the game of a national championship game for Alabama, and then he suffers that awful hip injury.
Yeah, it's been one thing after another since that hip injury. Yeah. And I know it's his decision, but at some point you got to save someone from themselves. He's a football player. He's a warrior, et cetera, et cetera. He's going to want to play. You know he's going to want to play. He's going to want to play in 10 days. Can't let him do it. Save him from himself.
Yeah, I had an opinion until what Coach just said. It's like, it'd be wrong for anyone to sit there and already decide what his future is. To say he should do this or that.
You could say,
but
again,
I'm saying my initial thought was that football's great. It's awesome. You know, we all love football. We all love to talk about football and watch. But you know what's even better is being able to, you know, play with your kids when you're 40, 50, to have, you know, conscious thoughts when you're in your 60s, 70s, and 80s. And to see that hit wouldn't even register amongst the hardest hits of the day. Probably.
Of the game.
Of the game.
Yes.
He ran into a guy, the one person on that field who probably did not want to blow him up. Out of everyone out there, every player, he took on a guy who was probably of the mindset like, I don't want to blast this dude. And when you watch him hit him, you said he basically hit Hamlin in his bicep and his neck snapped. Hamlin was almost like he was doing a trust fall with Tua. Like, he didn't go to blast him. It was almost like he was holding him up, trying to catch him as he was falling into him. This was seemingly just visually as harmless of a hit as you could have, and yet you see what happened.
Yeah, it seemed kind of fluky.
It seemed kind of, and my thought is this: if you can get a concussion from that, then what happens when a 300-pounder really is barreling down on your blind side and he hits you? Like, and then how many concussions do you get before you finally go, before, you know, your wife and your kids and your family are like, we can't take this anymore.
But even before the hit, you were watching the play develop and you saw the hole open up. You're like, oh, he's going to run for it and get a first down.
I thought he was going to slide.
Just slide, bro.
I know.
And then you see him go, you know, kind of lean forward. You're like, oh, please, God, no.
It was like slow motion. Yeah. It was. And I you know, just my heart is with him.
Totally.
He's a good dude. Doesn't deserve to have this happen or the national conversation involve him.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in this manner.
And if you watched Hard Knocks with the Dolphins, I'm telling you what, if you came out of that with anything but the most amount of love for Tua, then you need to go back and rewatch it. The dude is amazing.
I think also it's the second time this has happened on Thursday night, where it's the only game. They're solo. And then there's all the Friday shows to talk about it and react to it. And it doesn't help.
Well, I mean, if this was a Sunday, it would still be the
best.
I understand what both of you guys are saying. And I understand why Mike McDaniel is saying what he's saying, but clearly this is the national conversation, and I understand why he's staying out of it.
Yeah,
he's the coach, man.
He made a good point.
He's the coach, and I understand why he answered it the way that he did. And that photograph of him kissing him on the head, just to wrap this up, it is just so moving. It is just a genuine sign of affection. It is the way Mike McDaniel coaches. It is a 21st century way of coaching players that is respected in the NFL. You can have your say about McDaniel as a coach, X's and O's and all that stuff. But that right there, and of course, of all the places for him to kiss him on the head, where whatever was going on with his brain on the other side of that skull, we were only left to guess, and what he's thinking in between those temples right now.